talk about Lincoln's assassination, a happy topic on a December morning. Welcome.
Start off, a lot of you, some of you have seen my Civil War talk, I think. And if you did, my introduction, I talk about when I was 9 years old, I used to take care of my great-grandmother who was blind, who was born in 1860. And at one point during our conversations, I found out that she met Abraham Lincoln when she was 5 years old. He was in Richmond the Friday before he was assassinated. And he saw her, she was a cute little girl, and he picked her up and he talked to her for a little bit, and then continued on his way. So that was one of her great memories of her childhood, was meeting Abraham Lincoln. And I think that conversation I had with her kind of sent me in a direction of, well, this is really interesting stuff. So, so Lincoln's assassination, April 15th, 1865. Good Friday, kind of a sad occasion for the day. It's interesting that of the 4 presidents who were assassinated, Garfield, McKinley, John F. Kennedy, and Abraham Lincoln, every one of them was killed on a Friday. Kind of an interesting little twist of history, I guess. Most people know the basic facts, I think. But I want to start, has anybody ever heard of the USS Sultana? No?
No.
Heard of it?
Yeah.
Okay. What do you know anything about it?
If I remember, was that one of the ones that had northern soldiers, prisoners of war?
Yeah. In April of 1865, it was bringing, if you can, I don't know if you can see from where you are, but the whole ship is covered in blue soldiers. It was bringing former POWs home at the end of the Civil War. POWs had been rescued from a prison called Andersonville, which was a horrific place. No one knows how many soldiers were on the ship because they didn't keep very good records, and a lot of guys heard that it was going north and just climbed on. The estimates are there were about 2,500 people on board the USS Sultana, which just after it finished passing Memphis, blew up, and 2,300 were killed. It is the greatest naval disaster in the history of the Navy, of any Navy. Greater than the Titanic, greater than Lusitania. It's the greatest naval disaster of all time. And it happened 2 weeks after Lincoln was assassinated. My point is, the reason I think we don't hear about it is because very few people in the country heard about it. Because they were so focused on the death of Lincoln. So here's this great tragedy. And it's interesting, there's a museum to the Sultana in Arkansas, right across the river from Memphis. And the museum is about the size of this room. It's a very tiny little museum. But the people there are very proud of what they've got. They've got pieces of it and things like that. And you can go down to the river, and on the banks of the Mississippi, there are pieces of the skeleton of the ship still there. But it just kind of missed national attention because of when it happened. I think that's kind of
Where was it when it blew up?
right just past Memphis, going north on the Mississippi River. Okay, so this is kind of a classic depiction of the assassination. John Wilkes Booth was a famous American actor. I often tell people, think of a famous actor you know nowadays, maybe Tom Cruise, someone like that, and everybody knew him. Anybody who knew anything about theater knew John Wilkes Booth. Abraham Lincoln, the spring before the assassination, saw John Wilkes Booth in a play at Ford's Theater and was very impressed with him as an actor and invited him to the White House because he wanted to meet this great actor. And John Wilkes Booth said, I don't associate with people who are fond of African American people. So John Wilkes Booth was from Maryland, he was part of an acting family. He had a brother who was an actor, he had a sister who was an actor. So he was not only famous, but he was also part of a whole kind of cultural thing that was going on in America at the time. In the booth with Lincoln at the time were his wife and a young major in the United States Army named Rathbone, and his fiancee named Clara Harris, whose father was a senator from Ohio. So the idea was that originally the people that Booth worked with, the original plan was to kidnap Lincoln. And they felt that if they could kidnap Lincoln, they could force the North to stop the war, to have a ceasefire. A lot of people don't realize as well that there were several occasions, several attempts to kidnap Lincoln. The very first one was when he was coming to Washington, D.C. for the first time after he got elected in December of 1860. And they found somehow the word got out that they were going to kidnap him off the train. And when the train got to Baltimore, he got off the train and the kidnappers missed him. So this is John Wilkes Booth. You can see, very typical, very good-looking guy, I think. Very actively kind of posed. Part of the reason why he was able to get into Ford's Theater, where he killed Lincoln, was because he had performed there several times. Everybody there knew him. He was not, it was not unusual for him to come up. He had his mail was delivered to the Ford's Theater because he acted there so often. He didn't have a permanent address, being an actor, and so he had his mail delivered to Ford's Theater. So he showed up there at least once a week. So having him show up at any given time was not a surprise to anybody. This is a cartoon that was when people found out what Lincoln did on the train and sneaking out in Baltimore. They found out that he wore a cloak and a tam o' shanter to make him look to look Scottish. And so this is a cartoon that's put in. The Southern papers, their cartoons said that he dressed up as a woman, trying to hide the fact that he was sneaking into Washington, D.C. He probably did have some kind of disguise on, because the idea was to help avoid kidnappers. So that was the first attempt. Booth had a team that was with him from the beginning. It grew and shrank over time. But it was a team that was pretty much with him all the time. This is a picture of Lincoln's second inauguration. John Wilkes Booth was there at Lincoln's inauguration. I'm sorry the picture's so small, but this is Lincoln giving his speech. Okay, and that's John Wilkes Booth right there, like 20 feet away. And he said in his diary, I should have taken the shot then. But he wanted to be able to get away, so he knew if he did it then and there, he wouldn't be able to get away. Because at that point, by 1865, his team had decided kidnapping Lincoln wasn't going to work. There was another time when Lincoln was going to go to a play, and they made an elaborate plan to ambush his carriage. And then something happened to the carriage, and he had to change carriages, and they missed the carriage because they didn't recognize it when it came through. So there were all kinds of plots involved. It wasn't a one-time thing. That was all part of the issue as well. Let's see. Technology's not my strong suit. Sorry, guys.
You want some help?
You just need to scroll down.
Yeah, I
Yes,
think
it's not. Okay. Sorry. Okay, good, thank you. this is another time when Booth got close to Lincoln. On April 11th, 1865, he made the announcement of the passage of the 13th Amendment in Congress. And he went out on the balcony at the White House and gave a speech. And Booth was on the lawn when Lincoln was giving the speech. So closer and closer, he's getting closer and closer all the time. And again, as I said, he had changed his mind. Kidnapping wasn't going to work. It had to be an assassination. By 1865, the South was obviously losing the war, and he thought the best hope for the South to pull out of it was to get rid of Lincoln. Ironically, if you know anything about American history, the death of Lincoln was worse for the South than it would have been if he'd stayed alive. Lincoln wanted to go easy on the South, and the people who replaced him were not inclined to be going easy on him. So Booth had this team put together, and they met at the house of a woman named Mary Surratt. Mary Surratt was kind of a wealthy woman. She owned several businesses in Washington, D.C., and in Baltimore, and other places in Maryland. And this was her house, and this is where the team was all living as they prepared. Later on, when the trial happened, the prosecution's position was, how could she not have known what these guys are planning to do? And that was pretty much the whole argument. There were things that she did that were suspicious. For example, a couple of days before the assassination, she sent a package to one of her businesses in Maryland, and there's all kinds of supposition what was in the package. Was it involved in what had something to do with the assassination? And my opinion is that she knew little if nothing about what was going on. And her son was involved, and it was, as far as she saw, it was her son and his buddies hanging out at the house. That's what I think. Other people want to see more of a conspiracy involved. One of the conspirators was this man named Lewis Powell, also known as Lewis Payne. I'm always struck by, he's a really good-looking guy. He could have been an actor himself. The first time I saw this photograph, I thought there was an actor playing him. But that was actually him. The plan was, the way Booth put it was, they were going to cut off the head of America all at the same time. So the play that Lincoln was going to go see, and it was in the newspapers that he was going to go see the play. The play that Lincoln was going to go see, Booth had performed it. And he knew that one of the funniest, was a comedy called Our American Cousin, written in England. And he knew, because he knew the play so well, he knew when the biggest laugh line was going to come. He knew that it came in the performance of the play at about 10:30 in the evening. So his plan was to shoot Lincoln when the audience was laughing the loudest, to kind of cover what he was doing. So the team, the whole team, one part of the team was going to kill Seward, who was the Secretary of State. Another part of the team was going to kill Johnson, who was the Vice President. Another part of the team was going to kill Grant. And originally the plan was, Grant was supposed to go to the play that night. He and his wife were supposed to go to the play. But Grant's wife couldn't stand Mary Lincoln. Couldn't stand her. And if you know anything about her, Mary Lincoln was a little bit off her nut most of the time. So she really annoyed people. And so Grant's wife, when Grant was invited, because the war was almost over, Lincoln wanted to kind of have a talk with them and show his appreciation. And Grant's wife said, I'm not going to go to the play with that crazy woman. Sorry, no. And so another part of the team was assigned to kill Grant, who was leaving Washington, D.C. that night. So and all of them were agreed that they would attack between 10 and 10:30. So it all happened in one fell swoop. Well, fortunately for the country, but unfortunately in other circumstances, only Booth was the only one who succeeded in the group. So Powell's job was to kill Seward. He and another man, I'll show you his picture in a second, went to Seward's house, and it was 10 o'clock at night, and he knocked on the door, and a servant came to the door, and Powell said, I have a message for the Secretary of State, and he has to sign for it. And the butler who answered the door said, well, it's 10 o'clock, he's already in bed. And what Booth's team didn't know was about a few days before that, Seward was in a really bad carriage accident. And basically was in a body cast from the neck to his hips. And so obviously he was not up and around, moving around a lot. So the butler tried to stop Powell, and then Powell stabbed the butler and ran into the house. The butler wasn't able to speak, he just collapsed. And Powell's trying to figure out where he was, where Seward was. And at that moment, Seward's daughter came out of Seward's bedroom and said, "I'll be back in a few minutes, Father. I'm getting you some tea," which told Powell where Seward was. So he ran up the stairs, pushed past the daughter, broke into the house, and jumped on Seward and started stabbing him. By the fate of the gods or whatever, the body cast protected Seward. The only damage was, the first stab was to the face, and it sliced Seward's cheek open, and he would have a scar for the rest of his life from that. But the body cast stopped the knife from killing him. And eventually, two more people, one of Seward's sons came in, and his secretary came in. And those two went after Powell. Powell stabbed both of them and ran out. And as he was running out down the stairs and out the door, he just kept screaming, I'm mad," and ran out. We don't know if he really was, or if he was trying to establish an alibi for what he did. But he ran out, and his partner was waiting for him. His partner was this man, David Harold, who was with Lewis Powell and was assigned to kill Seward. So that team failed. The next person, so this is Seward. This is Seward. They're taken just the day before he was in the accident. It was before the body cast, before the scar. And Seward, of course, became famous later on for in negotiating the purchase of Alaska, which everybody called Seward's folly. But it turned out to be a good thing for our country that he did that. But so, I mean, it was very logical from their point of view. The Secretary of State, who represents the country, the President and the Vice President, and the leader of the Union Army. That all kind of made sense to them in a strange kind of way. But so Seward survived the attack. Let's see if I can do this now. What am I doing wrong? I'm sorry. What? This button here, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let's see. Oh. All right, thanks. Okay, so next one was Johnson, Lincoln's vice president. Andrew Johnson had been a senator from Tennessee, kind of a drunk, not very popular with Mary Lincoln. Some people suggested he should go to the play, and Mary said, no, the guy's an alcoholic, I don't want him there. He was staying at a hotel in Washington, D.C. They didn't have an official residence for the vice president at that point. So he's staying at a hotel called the Kenwood Hotel. And the man who went after him was a man named Axelrod. George Axelrod. His job was to kill Johnson. He got to the hotel. He even made it as far as Johnson's door, and then chickened out. Probably part of it was he got to the hotel early, and he was waiting for the 10 o'clock hour, so he went to the bar. He probably spent a little too much time in the bar. So when he got to Johnson's room, he just said, I can't do this. And so that part of the plot kind of fell through. Next person on the list was Grant. The thinking being, cut off the head, the president, the vice president, secretary of state, the commanding general of the Union Army. But he didn't go to the play. And the guy who was supposed to kill him, a man named O'Laughlin, Michael O'Laughlin, was assigned to kill Grant. They said the team said to him, "Okay, follow him and kill him when you get the best opportunity." So they followed Grant and his wife to the train station, bought a ticket, got on the train, and rode the train to the next stop, and then chickened out and got off the train at the next stop. So his part of the plot didn't work. One kind of failure after another. So now I'm gonna be embarrassed again. Uh-oh, what did I do? I'm sorry, Nisha, I'm a mess.
Your hands are too big.
Sausage fingers. Okay, so this is John Surratt, who his mother's house was considered part of the plot eventually. It's kind of an interesting story. Once I'm not 100% sure he knew everything that was going on. These were just his friends, and he invited them to stay at the house, and he kind of had an idea. But when Lincoln was assassinated, and it was very clear right at the beginning it was Booth who did it, because Booth didn't try to hide the fact that he did it. And so as soon as he heard that Booth had shot Lincoln, he left the city. He went to Canada, and then from Canada he took a ship to Europe. And in Europe, he made his way to Rome. And in Rome, he joined the Papal Guard. And he was working as a guard at the Vatican, this guy. And that, the funny uniforms they wear and everything. And about a year later, somebody was visiting, the daughter of an ambassador was visiting the Vatican and recognized Surratt. Because there had been pictures of him in the papers and everything. She told the Italian authorities, they arrested him, sent him back to the United States. He finally got back to the United States in 1867. He was put on trial, and they decided for a lot of different reasons, but basically the verdict was not guilty. And he lived to be ripe old age. And some people, again, it's kind of murky. Part of what makes it murky, and here, if you're interested, a lot of people like to look for conspiracies. I'm not a big believer in. I mean, this was a conspiracy, the whole team. But people want to see beyond the conspiracy part. A lot of people believe that Stanton, who was the Secretary of War, was part of the whole plot. I have kind of mixed feelings, but I don't like Stanton as a person in history. He's not a very nice person. And so this is where the conspiracy. So when Lincoln died, Stanton was put in charge of the investigation. And eventually, when Booth was caught, one of the things in his personal effects was his diary. And the diary was given to Stanton because he was in charge of the investigation. When the diary was eventually presented to court, there were several pages missing, torn out of the diary. Nobody knows what happened to those pages. Stanton said that's what it was like when he got it. He said, "Oh, Booth must have been taking notes in his diary and used it." Big mystery. Another part of the mystery is that once Stanton realized that Booth was going to probably try to escape from Washington, D.C., he put guards on every road out of the city except for one. And the one road that wasn't covered by guards was the road that Booth used to get out of the city. So a lot of people kind of say, Stanton. Because Stanton didn't agree with Lincoln's philosophy of going easy on the South. He wanted to be tough on the South. He felt that Lincoln was too wimpy to run the country. But I have a hard time accepting that. It was a team of conspirators, but I'm not so sure about Stanton. He was he's not a very nice person, but I don't think he was the kind of person who would do that kind of thing. Okay, Edmund Spangler was worked at Ford's Theater. He was a stagehand at Ford's Theater. And after Booth killed Lincoln and escaped out the back door of the theater, the stage door of the theater, Spangler had a horse ready for him. Now, in his defense, Spangler said, well, I was a stagehand and Booth was an actor, and he asked me to hold his horse for him. So, a lot of people included him in the whole conspiracy idea. Samuel Arnold, he was kind of like the backup guy on the bench. The idea was that if any member of the team couldn't do his part, that Samuel Arnold would step forward and fill in for Powell or Artsot or any of the other guys, Harold, who couldn't step forward. He would be the backup person. So, good choice, bad choice, I'm not sure, but that's what he was involved in that part. This is Mary Surratt, who has the distinction in history, unfortunately, of being the first woman executed by the federal government. Yeah, she was found guilty in the trial. And again, I'm not sure. She may have been highly involved, but I don't think she was involved enough to be one of the people who gets executed for it. I don't think she was that actively involved, in my opinion. But
How did they execute him?
hanged them. Hanged the four of them all at the same time.
Those were the good old days.
Okay. So this is Henry Rathbone and Clara Harris's fiance. This was taken, this is their engagement picture. They got married a year or so after the assassination. He was stabbed, because when Booth attacked, he had a gun in one hand and a dagger in the other. And Rathbone tried to stop him, and Booth stabbed him. Kind of an interesting, their story kind of takes an interesting turn. He felt guilt. I guess nowadays we call it post-traumatic stress. He hated himself for not stopping the assassination. He never forgave himself. And he gradually became more and more and more depressed. Eventually, he was assigned a diplomatic position in Europe, in Germany. And he and Clara, and they had 3 children at that point, went to Europe, and he just got, and people would say, oh, you're the man who was in the box with Lincoln. And that would just drag him down lower. And eventually, he had a complete mental breakdown. And he killed Clara, and tried to kill his children, but the servants in the house stopped him. And he was brought to trial and found mentally incompetent and was put in a mental institution. They used to call them insane asylums in those days. And that's where he lived in Germany, in Heidelberg, Germany, and lived out his life in a mental institution. But he never really forgave himself or got over, and maybe I could have done something more. Maybe I should have done something. And when you look at the situation, you really can't blame them. They were watching a play. When Lincoln and the other 3 got to the theater, the play was already in progress. And they stopped the play, and the band played Hail to the Chief. And the audience stood up and applauded as Lincoln and his wife and the young couple went into the box. And then when things calmed down, the play resumed. And it was according to reviews at the time, it was a very entertaining play. Every once in a while at the Ford Theater, they'll run it, they'll play it, they'll do the play. It's not very good, but by 1860 standards, people thought it was really good. But anyway, so they were very focused on the play. I have a hard time thinking, I feel bad for him that he blamed himself so much, because he was there to see the play. And so, the first thing Booth did was he shot Lincoln, and then Rathbone stood up, and Booth stabbed him, and jumped off the box. Has anybody here been to Ford's Theater? Yeah, it's not that, the box is not that high off the stage. And Booth, being an actor of that time, especially Shakespearean actors had to be very athletic. They had a lot of climbing and jumping and sword fighting and stuff like that. So he jumped from the box to the stage. Unfortunately for him, I guess, there was a flag draped on the box, an American flag, because that was where the president sat. The spurs on his boot caught on the flag, and he landed wrong on the stage and broke his leg. He turned and he raised the knife and shouted something. The most common thing people think he said was "Sic Semper Tyrannis," which is the state motto of Virginia, which was the major combatant in the Civil War on the southern side. What it means is, this is what happens to tyrants. There are other people said, he thought he said, "The South will never surrender." There's all kind of conflicting reports, but the most common ones was the "Sic Semper Tyrannis." So he limped off the stage. The stagehand was there with the horse, as was another one of Booth's conspirators, and the two of them took off. Obviously, as you can imagine, there was chaos in the theater. At first, people didn't realize what happened. Booth used a small gun, a Derringer. And so because it was a small gun, it didn't make a loud noise, and he timed it perfectly for when the crowd was laughing the loudest. And at first, people didn't realize what happened until the two women in the box started screaming. And then the panic kind of ensued from there. This is Dr. Charles Leal. He was 23 at the time, brand new surgeon. He was in the audience, and he was the first doctor to get to Lincoln. And Lincoln lived for about, he died at 7, so he lived for about 9 hours after he was shot. And Leal tried to stop the bleeding. There wasn't a lot of bleeding, actually, but he tried to stop the bleeding. And he eventually became Surgeon General of the United States as he matured and became more involved in the government. So he was the first one there, first one on the scene. I'm sorry, Nisha. Aha, I did it. Yay. Okay. This is John Parker. John Parker was Lincoln's bodyguard. Ironically, that morning, Congress passed the bill creating the Secret Service to protect the president. Up until that point, Lincoln, depending on where he was, had either military people or local policemen. Parker was a Washington, D.C. police officer. And so, where was he? There was a bar across the street, and that's where he was. It kind of, obviously, as you may imagine, it kind of ended his career as a police officer. But I think Lincoln was, remember, Lincoln's the first president assassinated. So our country really hadn't gotten into the mindset of that possibly happening. I think, a lot of people are critical of the poor protection that he had. Every other time he went any place, he had a squad of soldiers with him. This one time, I think because the war was winding down, he really wanted a break from the soldiers around him all the time. The closest he had was Major Rathbone in the box with him, which would have been Grant. And so he felt, it's a theater, it's okay. And Parker had seen the play before, and he didn't really want to see it again. So he went across the street to the bar, and that's where he was, unfortunately. I'm not sure it would have made a difference. I'm not sure it would have made a difference, because Booth was really, he knew the whole layout of the theater. Okay, this is Laura Keene. She was the lead actress at in the play, and she was the second person to get to Lincoln. And if you've been to the theater, I'm not sure how she did it. To get from the stage to the box, be the second person there, I'm not sure how she did that. It's not really explained very well. She started crying, and she picked Lincoln up and was holding him in her arms and crying. I don't want to sound cynical, but I kind of wonder if this actress saw a great opportunity to become more famous than she was already. I don't want to be, like I said, I don't want to besmirch her reputation, but I kind of wonder why she was the second person after the doctor there, and why she held Lincoln in her arms and wept. The dress was blood-soaked. it's kind of an interesting thing about that dress. She saved it. And bad things began to happen to her family. And the family became convinced that it was because Lincoln's blood was on her dress and she kept it in the house. And kind of on an interesting twist, when she died, the dress was in her closet. And the family was convinced that it was haunted. And what they did was they bricked up the closet with the dress inside of the closet and said, this will solve the problem of the curse of Lincoln. Before they did, they tore off a few pieces and sold them in the 19th century version of eBay, I guess. Little pieces about that big, little bloody pieces of the dress they sold. And if you go to the museum at Ford Theater where they have the assassin, there's a little piece of the dress is there. But that was Laura Keene. So Lincoln was brought to the Peterson House across the street. It's now a National Historical Site. And when I was a kid, I went there for the first time, and it was kind of, they had the bed where he died, and they had a mannequin in the bed of Lincoln, and they had, they don't have it anymore. I'm glad because it was so cheesy. But they had something in the chest, so the chest would move up and down. And then while you're staying there, it would stop. And you're like, I thought, that's really, Well, I think the first time I saw it, I was like 12. I said, wow, because I was 12. But then I saw it again later, when I was in my 20s. I said, this is really cheesy. And the next time I went, they had all the stuff, they had the furniture, but they didn't have the mannequin in the bed breathing. One of the kind of sad, ironic things is doctors, modern day doctors, have looked at all the reports and everything, and they think that his wound was survivable. Okay, because it was a small caliber bullet, because it was a Derringer. It didn't go in that deep, because it was a small caliber bullet. Modern doctors have looked at it and they said, what probably killed Lincoln was them trying to get the bullet out. If they had not tried to get the bullet out, he probably would have survived. But, I mean, they didn't know that. In those days, the way they worked, if you had a bullet wound, they had what was called a probe, which was like a long piece of metal, and they would stick it in the hole to find the bullet. And the modern doctors think now, they probably did a lot more damage to Lincoln trying to find the bullet and get it out than they would have if they just left it alone. He lived for 9 hours. Mary refused to go to the house. She went back to the White House. Lincoln's son was in the military, and he went to the house to be with his father, and they wouldn't let him in. No one knows exactly why. Maybe people thought it was too sensitive. He's a military officer, but they wouldn't let him in. So he wasn't there when his father died. Stanton was there, and Stanton's line becomes kind of famous. He said, now he's a man of the ages, a man for the ages. So Stanton was there, and again, the conspiracy people say, how come only Stanton was there? How come his family wasn't there? But I think that's kind of stretching a little bit myself. And here's the man himself. He was from Maine. Doesn't he look like a Maine fisherman or something? He was a brilliant Secretary of War, had a terrible personality, but I don't think he was part of the conspiracy. But he was part of the investigation and the search for Booth. It didn't take long for them to start making connections. When you hear about the police nowadays. Come on. You hear about police nowadays. Me. I see Nisha coming up behind me. Yep, okay, good. Thank you. So, so Stanton eventually, immediately sent out a wanted poster, several different ones, almost all of them with photographs of Booth. Like I said, there was no doubt who it was, because he was famous. You know, if a famous actor today did a horrible crime, everybody would know who it was. There'd be no doubt it was. So, $50,000 reward for him, $25,000 for the conspirators they knew about. Eventually, they would find out there were a lot more involved than they knew. So people began to look for him. And as I said, he'd get out of the city, and his first stop was to Dr. Samuel Mudd. Samuel Mudd, in my opinion, was not part of the plot, but eventually he was put on trial for being part of the plot. He went to Mudd because he knew him. Booth had broken bones before, being an actor, a very active actor. And Mudd was the guy he went to. He relied on him. He trusted him. So when he went to Mudd, he went to Mudd with his broken leg. Mudd set it for him and put a splint on it, and he continued on his way. Eventually, Mudd was put on trial, found guilty of being part of the conspiracy. We have an expression in our culture today: if you're in trouble, your name is Mudd. That's where it came from, because of Dr. Samuel Mudd. He went to prison. Became kind of a hero. He was in prison in Florida, and a malaria outbreak broke out in the prison, and he volunteered to take care of the prisoners. They offered to evacuate him, so he wouldn't get the malaria, but he stayed and took care of the prisoners. That's why I'm inclined not to think he's really part of it myself. But okay, so this is where Booth was eventually captured, at the Garrett farmhouse in Maryland. He and his partner Harold made it as far as the farm, and the farmer, he thought the farmer, because it was in Maryland and the farmer was in a slave area, he thought the farmer would be supportive, but the farmer was not, and he contacted the authorities. Booth and his partner Harold, there was a tobacco barn in the back of the house, and they were in the tobacco barn when the army showed up. And Booth refused to come out, and the soldiers didn't want to go in and get killed. So what they did was they set the barn on fire, which I always thought. I remember my wife grew up on a tobacco farm, and when she hears that they set the tobacco barn on fire, she gets, the poor farmer, she's all upset that they set the barn on fire. And in the course of the burning of the barn, this man, Sergeant Boston Corbett, who was part of the detail. If you've seen tobacco barns, they have slats in the side. He looked at the slat and he saw Booth, and he shot Booth. So he gets the credit, if you want to call it that, for shooting Booth. I remember when I was a kid growing up in the South, reading an article about Boston Corbett, and because it was a Southern article, they depicted him as a real crazy man. Completely insane. And some people say that that Stanton put him on the team on purpose to kill Booth. I just think he was a guy who thought he was going to become famous by killing the guy who killed Lincoln. But again, there's all kinds of, you want to go to conspiracies, you can do that. But this is the man who shot Booth. So Booth was shot. When he was shot, Harold surrendered, and the soldiers grabbed Booth and dragged him out of the barn and threw him on the porch, and left him there, and he bled to death, basically. He lived for about 5 or 6 hours after he was dropped on the porch. And the different versions of the last thing he said, but the one that I kind of go with was, "What a waste, what a waste." Was it his waste? Was it, who knows what he's thinking of. So this is the funeral, huge funeral for Lincoln. Largely, the funeral parade was largely veterans of the Civil War who saw Lincoln as, almost like a father. So there were thousands and thousands of troops who showed up for the funeral. This is part of the parade. I'm sure all of you probably remember Kennedy's funeral. When Kennedy's funeral was planned, Jackie did research on Lincoln's funeral and tried to copy as much of it as she could. So there's a lot of similarities. You see other photographs of the funeral, and then you see photographs of Kennedy's funeral. The similarities are amazing about what she wanted to do. Let's see if I can do it this time, Misha. Yay! All right. This is the hearse that was used for Lincoln. His family wanted to have wanted it to be a simple funeral, but Stanton said no, it's going to be fancy. So this is Eventually they developed a railroad car to bring him to Illinois, bring his body to be buried in Illinois. And they put extra windows in it and put the casket in the middle of the car. And they plotted a route so that it could go to as many states as possible between Washington, D.C. and Illinois. And an interesting thing happened. Walt Whitman, who was a big fan of Abraham Lincoln, wrote all kinds of poems. He wrote one poem called "Oh Captain, My Captain," about the death of Lincoln, how you steered the ship through the storm, and just as we were about to make it safe home, you died. Another poem he wrote was called When Lilacs Last in the Dooryard Bloomed. And again, it's a poem about loss, and it's about how much he really cared about Lincoln. That poem was printed in newspapers all over the country. And the reason he wrote the idea in the poem was this was April, and the lilac trees were just beginning to blossom. So that's what he made that connection in the poem. As the train was traveling from Washington, D.C. to Illinois, millions of people lined the tracks. The route was printed in newspapers, and people would go, and they went very slow through their towns. And what people did was they brought lilacs to the tracks and threw the lilacs on the tracks as the train was passing in recognition of the poem. And that's where the custom in our country of bringing flowers to a funeral comes from, is Walt Whitman's poem, and the people bring lilacs to the train tracks. So there's a great deal of national grief. This is just a snippet of the poem as it appeared in the newspapers. But that really, I mean, it's hard to imagine, because again, he was the first president assassinated, how the country really tried to wrap its head around it, and it was very, very difficult for them to do that. Okay, here comes up my not so magic trick. See how this works. I used to do slideshows. Those are much easier. It's hard to find projectors nowadays. Thank you, Lisa. Okay, all right. So this was the commission set up by Stanton to investigate the assassination. It's called the Hunter Commission, because the general in charge was named Hunter. There was one civilian, a member of Congress, on the board here, and they investigated, and they got all they thought were all the conspirators, and 4 got the death penalty. This is a picture of the execution. That's Mary Surratt here, and the 3 other men involved. So as I said earlier, she was the first woman in American history executed by the government for crimes committed. A lot of people felt some satisfaction in that. I don't know. So how did everything turn out? These are the people involved. Lewis Powell and David Harold, who went after Seward, and Harold eventually was teamed up with Booth, and he was captured with Booth. George Atzerodt and Mary Surratt were all hanged in the summer of 1865. Samuel Arnold, Samuel Mudd, and Edmund Spangler were all sent to prison, and in 1869, with the new president, who was Grant, Grant pardoned those people, gave a presidential pardon. He said they spent enough time in prison, and he wasn't absolutely sure how much they were really involved. Michael O'Laughlin, the one who went after Grant, He caught disease and cholera probably in prison and died before and John Surratt was the one who escaped the country, became a papal guard, and died in 1916. So, questions?
Do you have any, think why they didn't go after Stanton?
Well, the conspiracy people say because he was part of the plot. I think they didn't go after Stanton because they couldn't keep track of where he was, and most of the time he was surrounded by soldiers because he was Secretary of War.
So he would have been the hardest of the inner circle.
Of the group, he would have been the hardest one to go after. That's what I think. But again, the conspiracy people say, how come not Stanton? But I just think he was just too hard to get at.
But it's your point, and I've read the same thing, that he was the harshest, trying to get the war resolved.
Yep.
Did the most damage probably of the inner circle
Yep.
on the South, so.
Yeah, and that's the irony, I think, is the one person
Yeah.
they didn't get was the one who hurt them the most. Yeah.
Question, I'm not sure if I remember had it in school teaching history. That when the war broke out, England was gonna back the South because they needed the cotton for the mills,
Yeah.
and France was gonna back the North, and that's when they both parted.
Yeah, well, it was kind of interesting that that was at first because England was just having the Industrial Revolution, but history is filled with coincidences. 2 years before the Civil War started, Egypt became a colony of England. And guess what the number one export crop of England was? Egypt was cotton. So England didn't really need the South anymore. And then, people talk about the Emancipation Proclamation. Lincoln, it didn't free a lot of slaves, but what it did was it made the war a war against slavery. And England had banned slavery about 50 years before that. So now they couldn't, it was a really brilliant political move on Lincoln's part, because now Lincoln could not, England could not back the South because they were anti-slavery. So that was really smart on Lincoln's part to do that. But yeah, and then France was kind of iffy too. A lot of the medical supplies the South got during the Civil War, they got from France through Mexico. Went through Mexico, through Texas, and so they were kind of like playing both sides of the thing. Yes?
How can they justify hanging Mary Surratt when they let her son
Yeah.
get off?
I think, I don't know. During the tribunal, the evidence in the trial was all the packages she was sending and trips she was making, and it was all part of the plot. And so they thought the tribunal believes she was very actively involved in the plot. I don't, because she was a businesswoman. I think a lot of it had to do with her business. And she refused to defend herself during the trial. She didn't say anything during the trial. And to me it was kind of shocking. It put four of the guys ended up in prison. They could have put her in prison. I'm not sure exactly. I think maybe my feeling about it is, because we were talking about the 19th century, the Victorian age, the idea of a woman being involved in this was so shocking to people that they thought that was the only course to take was to execute her.
But then why not her son when they finally?
Yeah, I think because when they finally brought him back to the United States, things were cooling down. This is all, the 4 executions and the 4 in prison were all in the heat of within a year, less than a year of the assassination. I think by that time, and the United States was trying to figure out how to get past it. And so they decided, it was a very quiet trial. It was not publicized very. It was hard to find newspaper articles about John Surratt's trial. And it's like they said, let's just kind of get this out. Let's not bring it up again. And so, that his mother was executed and nothing even happened to him is kind of to me, an odd thing. But it's hard to dissect the emotions that were all involved in all of that. It's really hard to pinpoint it. Yeah.
Did anything ever happen to Lincoln's bodyguard who was at the bar?
He lost his job in the police department. But
I had read something like 20-odd years later, they went back and did something to him, but it was years and years
Yeah.
later.
yeah, he lost his pension, I think.
Yeah, something
is what
like
happened.
that.
Yeah, he lost his pension later on, but like I said before, it was the concept of killing a president was unfathomable. People just couldn't imagine it. So that's why his security, I mean, now, it's hard, I mean, like, I remember John F. Kennedy saying, if someone is willing to die, killing the president is not that hard to do. He realized that, and I think, and of course, we're kind of out of time, but there's all kinds of really amazing parallels between Lincoln and Kennedy, their deaths and their assassinations, and so. Any other questions?
I'm trying to keep my mouth shut, but where is that team now that we need them?
I'm not gonna go there.
I've been trying to not to say it, but I had to let it out. I'm known for dumb remarks.
Okay. Any other questions?
Where is Booth buried?
He's buried in his hometown in Maryland. You can go to the cemetery and see his tombstone. And for a long time, there were people who took very good care of it. Because I mean, we're shocked, especially looking back. But there were a lot of people in the South who were very happy with what he did. He was a hero. I mean, I remember I was in high school when Kennedy was assassinated, and I remember, because I'm from the South, hearing about kids in high school who, when they heard Kennedy had been shot, cheering. So it's
Not just in the South.
yeah, it's not just, yeah, exactly, yeah. Anything else? How we
Thank
doing
you,
on time?
Lee.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thanks very much, guys.
Okay.
If you have any other questions, I'll be glad to answer them for you.